Namaste and welcome to Shiva Sai Mandir and Tridevi Chamun Mandir in Denver, Colorado. This is Yamajit, and thank you so very much for joining me for Spring Navaratri, Chaitra Navaratri. This is day 5, and today we are honoring the 5th of the Mahavidyas. We're getting to halfway through the cycle, and we are honoring Ma Bhairavi, the wise teacher of the cremation ground. And I want to thank everybody for making it, especially a little time change here. It includes Kim and Elizabeth, who are joining right now, and everybody meeting in person. And those of you who are tuning in right now, please feel free to say hello using the chat function on the bottom of your screen. So just a very quick announcement. I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow's puja and satsang will also be at noon tomorrow, and then we'll go back to our 6 p.m. time on Monday. So again, welcome, namaste, and Jai Bhairavi. So let's go ahead and begin our satsang. And again, I'm reading from the 3rd chapter of my upcoming book, Kali Meditation, book 5. The 10 Great Wisdom Goddesses. Bhairavi, the wise teacher of the cremation ground. Bhairavi means the awe-inspiring one. She is also the consort of Lord Bhairava, the wrathful, destructive aspect of Lord Shiva. Bhairavi is the very embodiment of destruction and decay. Hence, she is termed as the goddess of decay. The principle of Bhairavi's role is that everything that gets created needs to be destroyed in order for the cycle of life to continue. As Sudaji, spring allergies. As Sudashi is called Tripuraura Sundari, so Bhairavi is known as Tripuraura Bhairavi, governing the principle of will, knowledge, and action. Goddess Bhairavi is almost indistinguishable from the form of Kali. She is pictured dwelling on a cremation ground. Her body is naked, sometimes smeared with ash like a sadhu. Her hair is disheveled. She wears snakes for jewelry, a necklace of skulls, and her body has eyes located all over it. Pardon me again. The message this conveys is the fact that we cannot hide from death and life changes, no matter how much we might try. She has 4 arms, 2 holding the mudras of dispelling fear and giving boons, the other 2 holding a sword and a kapala, a skull cup filled with blood. Bhairavi is also referred to as Shuddhamkari, who is benevolent to good people and punitive to those who are evil. Legend has it, when Bhairavi entered the battlefield in the war against our inner demons, her frightening appearance made those demon armies panic and scatter. In addition to her close resemblance to Kali, especially the skeletal Chamunda, Bhairavi is also identified with Durga in her most wrathful form. The name Chamunda Bhairavi is an epithet for both Kali and Durga. In her violent form, she is sometimes shown sitting on a donkey, her body covered with tiger skin and holding a human spinal column. Her mouth is dripping with the blood of asuras, of demons. She presents the Abhaya Mudra, the gesture of dispelling fear, and Vara Mudra, the gesture of giving boons. In this form, she is known as Shitala and was called upon to combat smallpox outbreaks, and nowadays childhood diseases like measles. In the same form, she is called Palden Lamo, a form of Kali worshipped in Tibetan Buddhism. As mentioned previously, the name Bhairavi itself implies terror or something that is awe-inspiring. Hence, the one who attains the status of Bhairavi is beyond the fear of death, which supposedly the greatest fear that we are faced by as living beings. Bhairavi is also the title given to female tantric gurus, such as the one Paramahamsa Ramakrishna's, one of Paramahamsa Ramakrishna's teachers. Astrologically, Ma Bhairavi channels the energies of all 9 planets. Ma Bhairavi thus dwells on the cremation ground, sometimes with her male consort, Lord Bhairava, sharing her knowledge with those who are willing to let go of their fears. In spiritual evolution, Bhairavi is personal transformation. She is the dissolution of one's old self, followed by the birth of the new, which results from meditating on that divine presence within. Jai Ma Bhairavi.
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 So I'm going to bring this painting a little bit closer. And we see Ma Bhairavi out in the wilderness. Sometimes she's shown in a cremation ground. Her jewelry or snakes, symbolic of Kundalini energy, also of renewal. Think of snakes shedding their skins. Like Shiva, she has the crescent moon in her hair. Her hair disheveled, meaning her Shakti, created feminine force energy, is completely freed. We see eyes covering her body, which again reminds us that we can't escape change. We can't escape transformation. And she's holding the mudras, dispelling fear and giving boons. Her body is covered with ash, like a renunciate. So, speaking of the fact that a Bhairavi is also a title for a female tantric guru, so one of Sri Ramakrishna's teachers was known as Bhairavi. And today, during our meditative reading, I'll once again be sharing a section from this little book, Kali the Mother, by Sister Nivedita, who was a disciple of Ramakrishna's spiritual wife, Sardama, and also one of his disciples, Swami Vivekananda. And today's and tomorrow's readings will be discussing this great guru of Dakshineshwar in Calcutta, India, Sri Ramakrishna. So at this point, I invite you to find a comfortable seated position. Those who are joining remotely, please find a position where you can look upon your screen with a relaxed gaze, your spine straight, your breath full. Breathing deeply and contemplating this image of Ma Bhairavi. As we go through the process of spiritual evolution, we're in a state of distress, and we call upon the divine, who first manifests as Kali, coming in with her sword, cutting attachments, cutting fears. She then manifests as Ma Tara, the path in which we choose to follow in our healing. In following that path, we first perceive the divine in the external, Tripuraura Sundari. In the sadhana we're doing, the image we're meditating on, the teacher that we're following, the book we're reading. But then, as we discussed yesterday in Ma Bhuvaneshwari, we discover that divine presence within. And that is where Ma Bhairavi comes in. Bhairavi is the transformation that takes place through those 4 previous steps of the process. She looks very much like Kali because at that moment of transformation, we have become Kali. We have become that divine mother. And tomorrow we're going to talk about how that divine energy within finds its way outwards in our acts of service. You're closest to represents the energies of all 9 planets. So all spiritual sources lead to the primary source. All spiritual roads lead to where we need to go. And that's something that was very much a teaching of Sri Ramakrishna. And I invite you to once again think about your intention for this Navaratri, the thing that you're healing or working to resolve in your life, or for someone close to you at this time. And know that in this 5th day of Navaratri, you're taking yet another very strong step toward making that intention a reality. So I invite you now to bring the palms of your hands together at your heart center. And we begin our practice by chanting the 3 syllables for Ma Bhairavi. And this will also be our puja mantra and our meditational mantra. Hsraim, Hsklirim, Hsrauh. So deep inhale for Hsraim. Hsraim. Inhale Hsklirim. Inhale Hsrauh. Pavitra Pavitrova Sarvavastam Gatopiva Yashmare Pandarikaksham Sabhyabhyanta Sushi. Om Shuklam Bharadhanam Vishnum Sashivanam Shutobijam Prasnavananandaya Tsavavigno Pasantaya Jai Ganesha.
Jai Ganesha.
Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshvara Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Sri Guru Ve Namah. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Om Triambakam Yajamaye Sagandim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukameva Bandhanam Michur Mukshiyam Amritaha. Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya.
Devi Prapanote Hare Prasida Prasida Matara Jagata Kilasya Prasida Vishve Svada Pe Vishvam Tvamishora Devi Chachara Charasya Jema Devi Hsraim Hsklirim Hsrauh 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 Om Tripuraura Devye Vidmaye Kameshvari Chadimai Tano Bhairavi Prachodayat Jema Bhairavi. So I invite you now to close your eyes, breathe deeply, and join me in some further repetitions of Bhairavi's mantra before we begin our reading. Hsklirim, Hsraim, Hsklirim, Hsrauh. 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 Hsraim, Hsklirim, Hsrauh, Hsraim, Hsklirim, Hsrauh, Hsraim, Hsklirim, Hsrauh, Hsraim, Hsklirim, Hsrauh, Hsklirim, Hsrauh, Hsraim, Hsklirim, Hsraim, Hsklirim, Hsrauh. So with your eyes closed, I invite you to continue breathing deeply. And let the words from our continued story guide your visualization and revelations. Kali the Mother, Chapter 3, Part 2. It is not as an interpreter of one's love to the divine, but as the great incarnation of the spirit of the mother towards her children that we pass on and kneel at the feet of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Here is one who has but lately gone out from amongst us. Less than 20 years ago, he was teaching in the temple garden at Dakshineshwar near Calcutta. And so large loomed the divine through him that many of those who knew and loved him then speak his name to this day with bated breath, calling him, O Lord. For in the case of Ramakrishna, innumerable prayers and unheard austerities had culminated in a realization of so profound, that there was scarcely a memory of selfhood left. The man who lived and moved before his disciples was a mere shell that could not fail to act as the indwelling motherhood willed. He never used to say the expression I or mine, preferring he who dwells here, indicating his own heart, and usually my holy mother. At this original physique must have been extraordinary, as we can infer, since it stood the strain under which his religious yearnings hurried it for 50 years. But far more wonderful was the complexity and many-sidedness in character and of development that made him feel the perplexities of every heart, as if they were his own. His was probably the only really universal mind of modern times, yet the whole was wrought to such unity that the peace of it fills to this day the little chamber where he dwelt and abides in a mighty presence under a great tree of meditation. That little room, how poor, even to meanness it looked when I last saw it. It was night, and a tiny lamp, a cup of oil with a floating wick, illuminated the exquisite purity of bed linen and the fresh flowers placed by faithful hands before the master's picture. The lamp was lifted, and the long shadows seemed to come down from some dim upper abode and prostrate themselves in worship. It was as he had used it in the lounge beside the bed, a huge water jar in one corner, a few religious pictures on the walls, and nothing more. Outside, in heavy rain of June, fell steadily, and below the terrace of the Ganges moaned and hastened on. I have seen it in other moods, seen it when the oleanders nodded and whispered to the roses on the terrace, when the great mangrove groves behind were in full blossom, and the clang of bells for evening worship broke the silence to make the place like a smile at time of prayer. And I have seen it in the terror of the Indian noon, full of coolness and flower fragrance, but never did it look so poor as in that June night, and never was poverty made so beautiful. Here great scholars and potentates have been proud to have received, and they seemed, said, who was often present like children before the Lord. He at least knew of the difference made by wealth, and learning in the world. He dismissed the most important man in his district with a frozen frown from his presence because he stood upon his riches and his name. He would leave companies of distinguished persons to themselves, and he would spend hours listening to the confidences of anxious women about her home, or in the instruction of some nameless lad, yet his touch fell on none lightly. A great preacher known to the West as to the East changed his teaching when he knew him. In his new thought of the motherhood of God, and many of the strongest men of India today sat at his feet in their boyhood. An unlettered peasant from the Brahmins of the villages, scarcely able to read and write, he seemed, yet if original thought and wide reading are enough, he was a profound scholar, for he had a remarkable ear and memory that made him retain the sounds of the Sanskrit perfectly with the translation. And as a vast quantity of literature was read and recited to him from time to time, he had acquired in this way an uncommonly large store. In those years for which we now speak, the last 20 of his life, he was a great light, known as a saint throughout Bengal and the northwest provinces of Nepal, and such visited in the informal Eastern way. Men felt themselves in his presence to the dealing with forces, and they could not gauge drawing and wisdom which they were unable to fathom. As if he were great music, they touched there the state that mighty music hints at, and went away saner, sweeter, stronger to their daily tasks. Yet all this time, a real inner life was lived amongst the group of young men who had forsworn the common motives of existence to call themselves his disciples. He was rarely without one or two or immediate attendants, and many were with him this day, with day and night for weeks and months together. Some were mere boys, and it was fitting that laughter and frolic should make a large part of their life together. Their master was never sad. A gentle gaiety seemed in the very air he breathed, broken instead by constant trance of rapture, and by the wonderful inspiration of his mood afterwards. When it is the night to all beings, then is the man of self-control awake. When all beings are awake, then it is the night of the man of knowledge. He would chant, waking them during the dark hours to come out and meditate in the starlight, while many a day was spent swinging on the elephant creeper that his own hands had planted amidst laughter and picnicking in the garden. A stream of plan or purpose, yet all missed. A few leading ideas were being insisted upon. A story here and there was building up the knowledge of the tremendous struggle through which he attained peace. They were watching him deal with men and things. Above all, they were bathing in that ocean of the real to which his presence was a perpetual access. And it is not this the wisest teaching, to make sure essential to leave the minds of the instructed to work out their own results like a young plant growing from seed. For we may be sure of one thing. In order that imposed upon us may become geometrical, but only the order that we create ourselves can come organic. It is the old Indian ideal of the university, to live in the forest with the master and realize the meaning of culture in the touch of his personality. These men to whom Ramakrishna Paramahamsa entrusted the mission and teaching of the Divine Mother, for he never dreamt of them as his own, were chiefly graduates from the neighboring colleges, many of them deeply tinged with the Western reaction, which was temper of the day. The distance between them and Christianity was shorter and would seem possible, but they were touched by the evidence of purity and enthusiasm for humanity. Occidental influences had stirred them to ideas of patriotism otherwise foreign to the Hindu temperament. They were looking for great things from the adoption of a more European taste and style of living, and that one thing incumbent in them was that in them lay to sweep away every image and relic of degraded superstition and to work for her emancipation from caste, from the Zenana system, which was the segregation of women, and from whatever else have now been considered her distinctive institutions. Speaking broadly, many of the finest minds of the Indian universities at this time felt thus, that these young disciples of Ramakrishna were among their following. Suddenly, they found themselves face to face with the ascetic saint, who, the old orthodox Hindu pattern, gentle, without solemnity or affection, full of humor, living in the garden almost nude, knowing little of English, save on hearsay. As a queer folk from overseas, the old man held them by a spell they could neither analyze nor break. The perfect sincerity and gigantic purity made themselves felt even by youth. But against his intellect, some made a desperate resistance. Long after one of them said, I was always looking for something that would prove him to be holy. It took me 6 years to understand that he was not holy, because he had become holiness himself. He was glad to hear all they could tell him of other religions, but he bated no jot of his own devotion to Kali, as sugar, he said, is made into various figures of birds and beasts. So one sweet divine mother is worshipped in various climes and ages under various names and forms. Different creeds are but different paths to reach the supreme. The ritual of Kali worship is the only existing provision in India for animal sacrifice. It means something entirely different from the Jewish notion of propitiation. There is no idea whatever of making compensation for sin. The whole intention is to offer meat food first to the mother for her use and blessing. No meat is eaten by the Orthodox Hindu without being consecrated in this way, whether he or otherwise a Kali worshipper or not. But the anglicized portion of the community, while consuming vastly more animal food than their conservative brethren, take great exception to these preliminaries and have perhaps concentrated on their particular creed and consequence, all in honor, which idolatry as a whole inspires them. These were the associations of the disciples with her, whom their master called the Divine Mother. But it was not Kali only. There was not a symbol in India that he had not worshipped, and he did not and he did not love, not a worshipper, by whatever right, whose special need he had. He felt his own nature, and born till it satisfied, not a prayer or ecstasy or vision that he had not reverenced and understood, giving it true place in a growing knowledge. He was, in fact, the most perfect religious culture that the mind can conceive, the doctrine that different creeds are but different paths to reach the divine, propounded in a general way, was not new in India, but taught as this man taught it, with his strong contention that it was the actual duty of humans to play their own faith, to follow their own faith, for the world gained by many-centeredness, with the intense conviction, in whatsoever name or form you desire to know the divine, in that very name and form you will see it. With his assurance that rites and ceremonies contain religious experience, as the husk contains the germ, and above all, with that love that is said in every faith, bow down and adore where others kneel, for where so many have worshipped, the divine will manifest itself. It is unique in the world's history. To those who have learnt even a little of the authenticity of the religious consciousness, it is not difficult to see intellectually that creeds may bear to each other the realization of contemporary languages, all expressive of that one consciousness. But Ramakrishna in the garden of the Kali temple was a direct embodiment of the impulse to speak to each in his own language and tell him how to reach the goal. In this man's love there was no limitation anywhere. Let one be sincere, and neither race nor history nor stage of development would cut him off. Each who came to him had his own place given to him and kept it. His longing was for salvation, for every soul in the whole world. The universe from which one was insignificant, was missing, could not have seemed perfect in his eyes. Love such as this carries all hearts at last. Only such love deserves the name of the divine, the Mother. Jai Ma. 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 Jema. Jema.
Jema.
Jema Bhairavi.
Jema Bhairavi.
Jema Bhairavi.
Jema.
Jai Matadi.
Jai Matadi.
Jai Matadi.
Jai Matadi.
Jai Matadi. Om Sarvamangala Mangaye Shiva Svada Sadike Saranye Trambake Devi Ayane Namostute. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That was auspicious. I don't know what it was. Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritagamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat Om. Jai Ganesha.
Jai Ganesha.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya.
Jai Ma Devi.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma Kali.
Jai Ma Kali.
Jai Mata Di.
Jai Matadi.
Jai Ma Bhairavi.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma Bhairavi.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma Bhairavi.
Jai Ma.
Jai Mata Di. So I invite you to take a deep and clearing breath, letting go of the meditation, and slowly bringing the palms of your hands to your heart center, feeling that Divine Mother's presence within yourself, especially strong these 9 days. And giving gratitude to yourself for taking part in this practice. This practice and the ones to come. Slowly opening your eyes. And namaste.
Namaste.
Blessings always. Thank you so very much for joining me. And Jai Ma.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma. So, got a few closing remarks. So there were a couple of things mentioned in our reading of the activities of the Dakshineshwar temple in Calcutta. And if you ever have the opportunity to visit there, it's an amazing experience. I spent the summer of 2008 teaching in a small village called Karda, just outside of that city. I was also working as a street medic to the homeless living around the Shelda railway station. But it was mentioned the practice of animal sacrifice and Kali worship. And actually the first time I went to Dakshineshwar, I was blessed by one of the priests on the very site where the photo in this old stereopticon card from the 1890s was taken, showing goats being sacrificed on the site. And I was kneeling on the cobblestone and surrounded by pools of blood. And this is actually an act of sanctification. the animals are very quickly slaughtered, quick decapitation, and the meat is cooked and it is given as prasad to all the poor and homeless living around that temple. And that particular day, I donated some money to the temple to buy bags of rice for those prasad feasts. And I've also taken part in and witnessed similar rites in Nepal. And again, what we're really talking about is the blessing, a very special blessing of food, very often for family celebrations. When I was in Nepal, it was June, wedding season like it is here. And also it was the time of year when the families of 10th grade students learned if their sons or daughters had passed their exams and were eligible for university. And so there was just a great amount of celebration taking part at that time. And the goats or chickens or pigs that were killed in these rites were part of just very solemn and very celebratory family feasts. So I have another picture I'm going to show you. And this is 3 key figures, actually 4, of the Dakshineshwar temple. So first we have the very center, Ma Kali herself, Dakshin Kali, the benevolent Kali. And this is the very famous stone image of Dakshineshwar that's to whom Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was the first pujari and temple priest for. And then sitting next to him is his spiritual Ardama and their disciple Swami Vivekananda. And what you're looking at, the beginning of yogic philosophy and yogic practice coming to the West. So Ramakrishna and also Sardama and Vivekananda were amazing. Vivekananda, by then Ramakrishna had died of throat cancer, but so Sardama became his principal guru. She gave the blessing for him to go westward. And the first of those trips was in 1893 to the World's Fair in Chicago. There was the Congress of World Religions to which he spoke. And he just brought the whole hall into a standing ovation. So again, as Westerners called to this path, this is really a lineage we can all draw from. And then something else that's important to note is that both Ramakrishna and Sardama are both, even though they were living at the same time, are considered avatars of Ma Kali, embodiments. People might think, how can 2 people be that at the same time? Well, we're talking about just the most infinite power going through the whole universe. So she can certainly have more than one mouth, one person to serve as an example for her. There was a description in today's reading of their bedchamber, and it's a very sacred shrine within that temple complex. And Guruma of 2008, I was a great honor of spending some time meditating in that bedchamber. And interestingly enough, the one I had visions of was Sardama. And she serves as a wonderful embodiment, a wonderful example of devotion in the form of seva, devotion in the form of service. And that's something we're going to discuss in more detail tomorrow when we honor the next Mahavidya, the 6th of the Mahavidyas, Ma Chinnamasta. And she's literally the mother who gives everything for her children. So thank you. I think I see a question coming up. And one of our viewers, Elizabeth, thank you for making that statement. You don't necessarily need to be a vegetarian image to India, or 506. I've not eaten it since. And I actually did my lower GI a major favor in giving that up. But I do eat small amounts of meat, and I try to remember the sacrifice made by the animal so that we may eat. So I want to thank everybody that joined today and who'll be joining later by watching the recordings. I look forward very much to you joining me tomorrow at noon for honoring Chinnamasta. And by the way, Chinnamasta is really a form of the Divine Mother that my wife Jamie is very close to, and so I'm going to be borrowing two of her images of that deity. So again, thank you and blessings always, and look forward to you joining me tomorrow. Jai Ma.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma. Jai Ma.